Let me know in the comments which city you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe.
You know, for most of my life, I felt like a whisper in a crowded room. After losing my parents, it was just me. Navigating the world felt like walking through a fog, always a step behind, always a bit out of focus. Every day was a quiet struggle, a constant balancing act with bills and responsibilities that felt too heavy for my shoulders. I was used to being overlooked, to blending into the background, and honestly, I'd almost come to accept it as my natural state, a kind of protective invisibility. But even with all that weight, there was always this tiny spark inside me, a stubborn little flame of hope and a genuine desire to connect, to find some truth in the everyday chaos. I never thought of myself as beautiful, not in the way magazines or movies define it, but I held on to a belief that there was something real, something kind, within me. It was a quiet strength, a hidden current beneath the surface of a life that seemed to everyone else utterly unremarkable, almost unforgettable. That Tuesday, though, felt different. It started like any other. The same worn-out shoes, the same bus route, the same quiet dread of another long day. But then, as I was walking through the park, lost in my own thoughts, this little whirlwind of a girl, no older than 5 or 6, came barreling right into me. She stumbled, and I instinctively reached out, catching her before she fell. Her eyes, wide and curious, locked onto mine, and in that instant, something shifted. A tiny crack appearing in the wall I'd built around myself. She was Cecilia, as I would soon learn, and her energy was infectious, a bright, unbridled joy that cut through my usual reserve. Most kids, especially those from her world, were wary of strangers, but she just clung to me. She started talking, a rapid-fire stream of questions and observations, as if we'd known each other forever. It was disarming, completely unexpected, and in that moment, as her small hand found mine, I felt a warmth spread through me that had been missing for a very long time, a feeling of being truly seen. Her nanny, a woman who looked utterly frazzled, rushed over, apologizing profusely. That's when I first saw Laura Montero. She wasn't the nanny, of course, but Cecilia's grandmother, a woman whose presence filled the entire space around her, even in a public park. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, took me in, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet assessment that made me feel both exposed and, strangely, understood. Cecilia, still holding my hand, looked up at her grandmother with an innocent plea, a silent request that I stay, and it was clear Laura saw it. Laura introduced herself, her voice calm but authoritative, and then, almost casually, she offered me a job as a nanny and private tutor for Cecilia. My mind reeled. It was so out of left field, so completely beyond anything I could have imagined for myself. My first instinct was to politely decline, to retreat back into the familiar shadows of my life. But then I looked down at Cecilia, who was still gazing up at me with those hopeful, trusting eyes. And something inside me just said yes. The Montero estate was something out of a dream, a sprawling house with gardens that seemed to go on forever. It was intimidating, of course, but Cecilia's excitement was contagious, pulling me along. My new room was more luxurious than any place I'd ever lived, and for a moment, I just stood there, taking it all in. The soft carpet beneath my feet, the sunlight streaming through the large window. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life, and a tiny voice in my head kept whispering, "Is this really happening?" My first few hours were a blur of getting to know Cecilia better, helping her with her homework, and just playing. She was such a bright, curious child, and it was easy to fall into a rhythm with her. The house, despite its grandeur, felt surprisingly warm, largely due to Laura's calm and welcoming demeanor. I hadn't yet met Benicio, Cecilia's father, and a part of me was a little nervous about that encounter, knowing his reputation in the fashion world. But for now, it was just me and Cecilia, building a quiet, genuine connection. As the afternoon wore on, a different kind of energy started to fill the house. The staff seemed to move with a subtle anticipation, and I could hear hushed conversations about a meeting, an important arrival. I figured it was Benicio, and my stomach did a little flip. I tried to calm myself, reminding myself that he was just a person, but the sheer scale of his influence, the way his name echoed through the fashion world, made him feel larger than life, almost mythical, and I was just me. Then he walked in. It wasn't a grand entrance, no dramatic music, just him, stepping into the living room where Cecilia and I were building a tower of blocks. He was taller than I expected, with a presence that was both imposing and, strangely, distant. His eyes, though, were what struck me most. They held a deep sadness, a kind of guarded emptiness that made my heart ache a little, even though I didn't know why. He barely glanced at me, his gaze going straight to Cecilia, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a fleeting moment of warmth in his otherwise reserved demeanor. He acknowledged me with a brief, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that felt more like an obligation than a greeting. It was clear I was just another staff member, another face that would likely blend into the background of his busy, high-stakes life. I understood it, really. He was a man consumed by his work, by the weight of his responsibilities, and probably by a grief I couldn't even begin to fathom. Still, a tiny part of me, the part that always hoped for a connection, felt a familiar pang of disappointment, a reminder of my usual invisibility. But Cecilia, bless her heart, had no such reservations. She immediately launched into a detailed explanation of our block tower, pulling him closer, her small hand tugging at his suit jacket. And in that moment, watching him listen to her, really listen, with a tenderness that softened the sharp edges of his demeanor, I saw a glimpse of the man beneath the powerful facade. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to make me realize that there was more to Benicio Montero than the world-renowned fashion mogul. Later that evening, after Cecilia was tucked into bed, Laura called me into her study. The room was grand, filled with books and art, but her expression was surprisingly gentle. She spoke about Cecilia, about how much my presence had already brightened her granddaughter's world, and I felt a genuine warmth spread through me. It was clear she valued the real, honest connection I had with Cecilia, something beyond any resume or formal qualification, a bond that transcended the usual boundaries of employer and employee. Then, she pivoted. She started talking about the Montero brand, not just as a business, but as a legacy, a vision. She spoke of a new direction, an inclusive line, something that truly represented authenticity and inner beauty, not just the superficial glamour. As she spoke, her gaze lingered on me, a thoughtful, almost speculative look in her eyes that made me feel a strange mix of confusion and a faint, unfamiliar flicker of something like possibility. She explained that they were looking for a new face, someone who embodied the very essence of this new direction. Someone real, relatable, someone with an inner light that shone through. My mind raced, trying to figure out who she was talking about, who this perfect person could be. I thought of all the models I'd seen in magazines, the impossibly perfect faces, and knew instantly it couldn't be me. I was just Clara, the quiet nanny, the one who blended in, not the one who stood out. But then, she said it. Her words were soft, almost a murmur, but they hit me like a physical force. "Clara," she said, her eyes unwavering. "I believe that person is you." My breath caught in my throat. Me? A model? The idea was so absurd, so far-fetched it felt like a joke. I probably looked like a fish out of water, my mouth slightly agape, trying to process the sheer audacity of her suggestion. The silence in the room stretched, thick with my disbelief, and the only sound was the frantic beating of my own heart. I tried to protest, to explain that I had no experience, that I was shy, that I was, well, just me. But Laura, with that calm, knowing look, simply waved away my objections. She saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, a potential I hadn't even dared to dream of. She spoke of a journey, not just a job, a chance to truly bloom, to discover a strength and beauty I didn't know I possessed. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. The rest of the evening was a blur. I went to bed that night in my luxurious room, the city lights twinkling outside my window, and my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, excitement, disbelief, and a tiny, fragile seed of hope. The woman who had felt invisible just that morning was now being asked to step into the spotlight, to become the face of something grand. It was a leap of faith, a plunge into the unknown. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange, undeniable pull towards it. The next morning, the house felt different, charged with a new kind of energy. Laura had already arranged for a team to come in, not just stylists, but people who seemed to specialize in transformation. They were kind, professional, and they moved with an efficiency that was both impressive and a little disorienting. I felt like a doll being gently handled, my usual clothes replaced with fabrics I'd only ever seen in shop windows, my hair being styled in ways I didn't know were possible. It wasn't about changing who I was, they kept reassuring me, but about revealing what was already there. They talked about angles, about light, about bringing out my natural features. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time, I saw something beyond the plain girl I'd always known. It wasn't just makeup or clothes. It was a subtle shift in how I held myself, how I looked at the world, a growing confidence that felt both foreign and strangely right. Cecilia, meanwhile, was utterly delighted by the whole process. She would sit nearby, watching with wide, fascinated eyes, offering her own enthusiastic critiques and compliments. Her innocent joy was a grounding force, a reminder that amidst all the dazzling changes, the most important thing was the genuine connection we shared. Her laughter, bright and clear, was a constant melody in the background of my whirlwind day, a beautiful counterpoint to the hum of the hairdryers and the rustle of expensive fabrics. Benicio, on the other hand, was a different story. He'd walk through, sometimes catching a glimpse of me, and his expression would be unreadable. It wasn't disdain, not exactly, but a kind of detached curiosity, as if he were observing a new piece of art in his home, something interesting but not quite personal. I knew he was busy, consumed by his work, but there was still that familiar feeling of being a background character in his life, even as I was literally being transformed into something new. The first photo shoot was a whirlwind. I was nervous, my hands clammy, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The cameras, the lights, the sheer number of people watching me. It was all so overwhelming. But Laura was there, her presence a steady anchor, her quiet encouragement a lifeline. She'd offer gentle cues, remind me to breathe, to just be myself. And slowly, painstakingly, I started to relax, to find a rhythm amidst the chaos. It was strange, seeing myself through the lens. The photographers would show me the shots on their screens, and I'd hardly recognize the person looking back. It was still me. Yes, but a version of me I'd never seen, a stronger, more vibrant Clara emerging from the shadows. It was like they were pulling out a hidden layer, revealing a facet of my identity I hadn't known existed, and it was both thrilling and a little bit terrifying. Days turned into a blur of fittings, makeup sessions, and more shoots. I was still Cecilia's nanny, of course, and those moments with her were my sanctuary. A return to the simple, honest joy that had started this whole incredible journey. Her unconditional affection was a constant reminder of what truly mattered, a stark contrast to the dazzling, sometimes superficial world I was now stepping into. Benicio's presence in the house remained a constant, though distant, hum. He was always working, always on calls, a man burdened by an invisible weight. Sometimes our paths would cross in the hallway, or at dinner, and he would offer a polite, almost formal greeting. There was still that guardedness in his eyes, that lingering sadness, but I noticed a subtle shift, a fleeting moment where his gaze would linger a fraction of a second longer, a hint of something unsaid. One afternoon, during a break from a particularly intense shoot, I found myself alone in the garden with Cecilia. She was chasing butterflies, her laughter echoing through the air, and for a moment, the weight of everything, the new world I was inhabiting, just lifted. It was pure, unadulterated happiness, a feeling I hadn't allowed myself to fully embrace in years, and it was all thanks to this little girl. Suddenly, Benicio appeared, his usual serious demeanor softened by the late afternoon light. He watched Cecilia for a moment, a faint smile playing on his lips, and then his gaze shifted to me. This time, it wasn't fleeting or detached. It was direct, searching, and for the first time, I felt like he was truly seeing me. Not just the nanny, not just the new face of the brand, but Clara, the person. He walked over, slowly, deliberately, and sat down on the bench beside me, a comfortable silence settling between us. Cecilia, oblivious, continued her playful pursuit of the butterflies. He didn't speak about work, or the brand, or even Cecilia at first. He just sat there, breathing in the quiet peace of the garden, and I could feel a subtle relaxation in his shoulders, a slight easing of the tension that usually seemed to cling to him. Then, he spoke. His voice lower than usual, almost a murmur. He talked about Cecilia, about how much happier she seemed since I arrived, how she hadn't connected with anyone like this since her mother. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief, and I felt a pang of empathy for him, for the quiet burden he carried. It was a raw, honest moment, a crack in his carefully constructed facade. He looked at me then, his eyes still holding that sadness, but now with a glimmer of something else. Gratitude, perhaps, or a nascent curiosity. He thanked me, not just for taking care of Cecilia, but for bringing light back into their home, for being a source of genuine joy for his daughter. His words were simple, but they resonated deep within me, a recognition that felt more profound than any compliment about my appearance. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, he continued to talk, sharing small anecdotes about Cecilia, about his hopes for her future. It wasn't a conversation about fashion or business. It was a conversation between two, people who cared deeply about a child, a shared understanding that transcended our vastly different worlds. And in that quiet, intimate space, I felt a connection forming, a fragile thread weaving between us that was entirely unexpected. The conversation flowed easily, surprisingly so. We talked about simple things, about Cecilia's latest drawings, about the books she loved, about the way she saw the world with such unburdened wonder. It was a side of Benicio I hadn't seen, a gentle, almost vulnerable man who was clearly devoted to his daughter. and it was a revelation. The air around us felt lighter, the sadness in his eyes seeming to recede, replaced by a quiet, contemplative peace. He even chuckled once, a low, rumbling sound that surprised me and brought a genuine smile to my face. It was a small sound, but it felt significant, like a tiny crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. In that moment, sitting there in the fading light, I realized that this unexpected journey was about so much more than just a job or a transformation. It was about healing, about finding light in unexpected places, and about the quiet, powerful magic of human connection. That evening, after Benicio left for a late meeting, I found myself replaying our conversation in my head. It wasn't just the words, but the way he'd looked at me, the way his voice had softened. It was a glimpse behind the powerful facade, a hint of the man beneath the public persona. And it stirred something within me, a feeling I hadn't recognized before, a gentle warmth that settled deep in my chest. Laura, always perceptive, seemed to notice the shift in my demeanor. She smiled, a knowing, almost mischievous glint in her eyes, but said nothing directly about Benicio. Instead, she spoke of the upcoming launch of the new line, of the incredible response the initial images were already generating. She talked about the power of authenticity, about how my genuine spirit was resonating with people, and I felt a blush creep up my neck. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations for the official launch. The house was buzzing with activity, designers, marketing teams, journalists. It was a constant stream of people, all focused on this new era for the Montero brand. I was still balancing my time with Cecilia, making sure her routine remained a calm anchor in the midst of the escalating excitement. And those moments with her were more precious than ever. Benicio was even busier. But now, when we crossed paths, there was a subtle difference. He would pause, offer a genuine smile, sometimes even a brief, shared glance that spoke volumes without a single word. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a growing familiarity that transcended the professional boundaries, and it felt comfortable, surprisingly so, in a way I hadn't anticipated. The day of the launch arrived, a flurry of last-minute adjustments and nervous energy. I was dressed in one of the new designs, a simple, elegant dress that felt like a second skin, and as I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the confident woman staring back. It wasn't just the clothes or the makeup. It was the culmination of weeks of quiet growth, of Laura's unwavering belief, and of Cecilia's pure, unconditional love. The event itself was a dazzling spectacle. Flashing lights, a sea of faces, the murmur of excited voices. It was everything I'd only ever seen on television. My heart pounded, but this time, it wasn't just fear. It was a thrilling mix of anticipation and a strange sense of belonging. I walked onto the stage, the spotlight warm on my face, and for the first time, I felt truly present, truly seen. Not just by the cameras, but by myself. As I stood there, bathed in the glow of the lights, I could see Laura in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. And next to her, Benicio. His usual guarded expression was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen before. A profound sense of wonder, almost awe. His gaze met mine, and in that moment, the world seemed to shrink, everything else fading into the background. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared breath, and in his eyes, I saw a reflection of the woman I was becoming, a woman he was finally seeing. The applause was deafening, a wave of sound that washed over me, but all I could focus on was that look in Benicio's eyes. It was as if a dam had broken, a wall crumbling, revealing a depth of emotion I hadn't dared to imagine. He wasn't just seeing the model. He was seeing Clara, the one who brought joy to his daughter, the one who had, in some inexplicable way, started to mend the broken pieces of his own heart. After the presentation, the room was a blur of congratulations and interviews. Everyone wanted a piece of the new face of Montero, but all I wanted was to find Benicio. When I finally did, he was standing a little apart from the crowd, a quiet intensity in his gaze. He reached out, almost hesitantly, and took my hand, his touch, sending a jolt through me that had nothing to do with the cameras or the spotlights. He didn't say much, just squeezed my hand, his eyes conveying 1,000 unspoken words. There was a vulnerability there, a raw honesty that was both disarming and incredibly moving. It was clear that this day, this unexpected turn of events, had impacted him just as profoundly as it had impacted me, opening up a door he thought was permanently closed. That night, back in the quiet of the Montero home, after the last of the guests had left and the house settled into a peaceful hush, Benicio sought me out. He found me in Cecilia's room, where I was reading her a bedtime story, her small hand nestled in mine. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching, and the air felt thick with an unspoken understanding. When Cecilia finally drifted off to sleep, he motioned for me to join him in the living room. The grand space felt different now, less imposing, more intimate. He poured us both a glass of water, a simple gesture that felt incredibly personal. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, filled with the echoes of the day's events and the quiet hum of two lives irrevocably changed. He started to talk, slowly at first, about his wife, about the pain of losing her, a grief so profound it had consumed him, leaving little room for anything else. His voice was raw, tinged with a sadness that still lingered, but there was also a new note, a hint of something thawing, something releasing. He spoke of how Cecilia had struggled, how he had struggled to connect with her, to be the father she needed, trapped in his own sorrow. Then he looked at me, his eyes clear and direct, and he said, "You changed everything, Clara." His words were soft, but they held an immense weight, a recognition that went beyond gratitude. He spoke of the light I had brought back into their lives, the laughter, the genuine connection Cecilia now had, and how, in turn, that light had begun to reach him, pulling him out of the darkness he had lived in for so long. He confessed that he hadn't believed in happiness, not truly, since his wife's passing. He'd built walls, not just around his heart, but around his entire existence, convinced that protection from pain meant protection from everything, including joy. Hearing him say it, so openly, so vulnerably, sent a shiver down my spine. It was a stark reminder of the depth of his loss, but also of the immense courage it took for him to even utter those words, to acknowledge the raw truth of his feelings. He spoke of the subtle shifts he'd noticed in himself, the way Cecilia's laughter now echoed in his own heart, the quiet moments of peace he found, just by being in the same room as us. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic transformation, he explained, but a slow, gentle thawing, like ice melting under the warmth of an unexpected spring sun. And in his eyes, I saw a flicker of something new, something hopeful, a reflection of the very light he said I had brought. I sat there, listening, my own heart swelling with a mix of empathy and a profound sense of connection. It wasn't just about the fashion world, or the job, or even the incredible transformation I'd undergone. It was about this raw, honest moment of shared humanity, two people from vastly different worlds finding common ground in the quiet space of grief and the unexpected blossoming of hope. It was a feeling that transcended words, a deep, resonant understanding. He hung in the air, a silent promise, a fragile beginning. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but something deeper, something more profound, a recognition of a shared future, a life intertwined not just by circumstance, but by a genuine, undeniable connection. My heart thrummed with a quiet joy, a feeling of rightness that settled deep in my bones, a sense of finally being exactly where I was meant to be. From that day forward, everything shifted, subtly at first, then more profoundly. Our reached out again, this time to gently touch my hand, his thumb tracing a soft circle on my skin. His gaze was unwavering, filled with an emotion that was both tender and incredibly powerful. "Clara," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how or why, but you've shown me that life can be beautiful again, that love can find its way even into the darkest corners." And in that moment, the world outside, the dazzling lights of the fashion industry, faded into insignificance. The words, conversations became longer, deeper, filled with a comfortable intimacy that grew with each passing hour. We talked about everything, from our dreams for Cecilia to our own quiet aspirations, slowly peeling back the layers of our pasts, revealing the vulnerable truths beneath. It was a beautiful, organic unfolding, a connection built on shared values and a mutual respect that felt incredibly rare. Cecilia, of course, was the happiest of all. She thrived in the newfound warmth of our home, her laughter echoing through the halls, a constant reminder of the love that now filled every corner. She would often draw pictures of us, a family of 3, her innocent artwork, capturing the essence of the bond that was steadily, beautifully, forming between Benicio and me, a bond that felt both natural and utterly miraculous. And then, one quiet evening, under the soft glow of the living room lights, Benicio knelt. It wasn't a grand gesture, no fanfare, just a simple, heartfelt question. His eyes, filled with a love that was both overwhelming and incredibly real. He spoke of a future, a family built on genuine affection and shared values, a life where light and love would always find their way in. And I, with tears in my eyes and a heart overflowing, simply said yes. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair, held in the beautiful gardens of the Montero estate, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. It wasn't about the grandeur or the opulence. It was about the quiet joy, the profound sense of belonging that filled every corner of that day. Cecilia, dressed in a tiny, ethereal white dress, was our flower girl. Her bright smile a constant reminder of the unexpected path that had led us all here, to this moment of pure, unadulterated happiness. Laura, radiant with pride, stood by our side, her knowing eyes reflecting the quiet triumph of her vision. She had seen something in me, something I hadn't seen in myself, and she had nurtured it, guided it, until it blossomed into something truly remarkable. Her belief had been the catalyst, the gentle push that had set this extraordinary chain of events in motion, and I would forever be grateful for her quiet, unwavering support. Benicio, usually so reserved, was transformed. His eyes, once shadowed by grief, now sparkled with a light I never thought I'd see. He held my hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and in his touch, I felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet certainty that this was real, that this was where I belonged. The world, which had once seemed so vast and intimidating, now felt like a warm, welcoming embrace, a place where anything was possible. Life after that day became a beautiful, ongoing discovery. We built our family on a foundation of genuine affection, shared values, and the unwavering love we had for Cecilia. The fashion world continued to buzz, but for us, the true runway was our home, the true masterpiece our growing family. It was a life I never could have imagined, a turn of events so profound, so unexpected that even now, I sometimes look back and wonder how it all happened, how a simple encounter in a park could lead to such an extraordinary, unexplained transformation. The days that followed the wedding were filled with a quiet, domestic bliss I hadn't known was possible. Mornings started with Cecilia's excited chatter, followed by shared breakfasts where Benicio and I would plan our day, a comfortable rhythm settling into our lives. Evenings were for quiet moments, reading together, or simply enjoying the peaceful presence of one another. The silence no longer heavy with unspoken grief, but light with shared contentment. My work with the Montero brand continued, but it felt different now. It wasn't just a job, it was a part of our shared life, a testament to the unexpected paths that had brought us together. The inclusive line flourished, resonating with people all over the world, and I felt a deep sense of pride, not just in the success of the brand, but in the message it conveyed, a message of authenticity and inner strength. We started new traditions, small things that made our house feel even more like a home. Friday night movie nights with Cecilia, cooking experiments in the kitchen that sometimes went wonderfully right and sometimes hilariously wrong, quiet walks in the garden as the sun set. Each moment, simple as it was, felt incredibly precious, a testament to the life we were building, brick by beautiful brick together. Benicio, in particular, seemed to shed more of his past burdens with each passing day. The lines of tension around his eyes softened, replaced by a warmth that was both comforting and incredibly attractive. He laughed more easily, a genuine hearty sound that filled the house with joy, and I often caught him just watching Cecilia and me, a look of profound contentment on his face, as if he still couldn't quite believe this happiness was real. It was a life that felt both ordinary and utterly extraordinary, a testament to the idea that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest, most unexpected encounters. Looking back, I still can't pinpoint the exact moment when the trajectory of my life irrevocably shifted. Was it the collision in the park? Laura's intuitive offer? Benicio's quiet vulnerability? It was all of it, and none of it. A confluence of events that felt almost predestined, yet entirely unexplainable. And that's where it stands, even now. This incredible, beautiful life we've built. It feels like a dream I woke up into. A reality that still holds a touch of the miraculous. I often find myself looking at Benicio, at Cecilia, at the vibrant home we share, and a wave of pure, unadulterated wonder washes over me. A silent question hanging in the air. How did this happen? It's a question I don't have an answer for, and perhaps that's the most beautiful part of it all. The mystery of it, the sheer unexpectedness, is what makes it so profoundly real, so deeply impactful. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest transformations aren't planned, aren't logical, but simply are, appearing out of nowhere and changing everything, forever.